My name is Tran. That is my Vietnamese name. Since arriving to the United States, I have added another name that is Douglas, and my patients call me Dr. Douglas Tran. I came here in 1975 in April. That was the month that South Vietnamese fell to the communists. A friend of mine knew about a group of people who were on the list to be evacuated from the embassy, the U.S. Embassy. And they told us to wait at a hotel in Saigon. They will just come pick us up. But then nobody showed up. So we went to the embassy. And at the time, the embassy was closed. And the Marines were there, and they were pointing guns at us. So we couldn't do anything. So that was the night that you saw on TV the helicopters were flying off from the roof of the embassy. So I was there that night. The night of the 29th, we slept outside the embassy. And then around midnight, I think, then they finished the evacuation. So when the sun broke, we got in, and they had gone. And then I went home, and then my oldest brother again offered to take the three of us, my older brother and my younger brother, so the three of us. He knew people were leaving at the riverside, so he wanted us to get ready and get in the car. He would drive us there. At the port, it was chaos. There were a lot of people trying to leave, and nobody knew exactly how to do that, how to get on a boat that would be leaving. We kind of tried to read what people were communicating. A lot of times it was nonverbal communication, just by looking, using the eyes to give direction. And my older brother was, of course, he was more experienced. So he looked at the way people give signal, and he told us to follow him to the boat that was the farthest from the shore. They were anchoring one next to the other, and if I remember correctly, there were two of them. Yeah, two of them. So we had to cross those two and get on the last one because he knew that one was going to leave. They looked ready, they had enough people, and the people there seemed to be anxious to leave. They didn't want to wait anymore, because the longer they wait, the more people would get in. They were really working hard to leave. They didn't even have time to untie the rope to the post on the shore. They had to cut it. When we saw them cutting, we knew that we didn't have much time. My oldest brother got there in plenty of time. He was doing fine. And I followed him immediately. And I turned around, and my younger brother was still way back. I told him, I said, come on, you're missing the chance. When he got there, the boat had separated the other boat for about maybe 2-3 feet. So that was barely enough for him to jump over. And I said, jump. And he jumped over, and I caught the upper torso of his, and then with his hands, clinging to the rim of the boat, and then I pulled him in. As I looked around, I saw a young girl, maybe 6-7 years old, being picked up to the boat, but the parents were still down on the port. And of course, they were older than us, and then they were not fast enough, so they couldn't get in. And then they left their daughter to go with the people on the boat. There were, at the end, we found out that there were about 250 people on that boat. The name of the boat is Vietnamese Ba. That is the third Vietnamese German fishing boat. It's a motorized boat, and it belonged to a German company. The company had left the boat there, and people working for the company knew that they can use that boat, so they took their family onto the boat along with us, who had no no permission to go with them or anything at all. Which is what we call stowaway. Yeah, two military patrol boat we call PT boat. And if you watch Apocalypse Now, PT boats were the ones that featured in that movie. Two PT boats approached with Vietnamese Navy, and they asked to be taken on board. And people on the boat, the pilot of the boat asked why, and they said, oh, they could not get out because being military, as soon as they showed up at a section of the river, they were shot at, like crazy. So it was impossible for them to cross that. So they had to get on a civilian boat so that people don't know that they're there, so that they don't get shot at. So they get on, but also because they knew the way, so they can direct the boat very accurately all the way to Singapore and then later to the Philippines. But then it wasn't that smooth as we went to out of Saigon and then into the wild area before we got to the sea. My brother told me that he was surprised that the boat was real far from if you go from the river, it's the right-hand side. It was real close to the left, and he didn't know what was going on. Then we were told to duck down to make it look like the boat was empty, because if they saw a lot of people, they would stop us for sure. The boat looked like an empty boat going to the ocean. And then suddenly we heard a loud explosion, and that was one of the rocket. We knew at the time, we were well versed about the weapons, the VCUs. We knew it was a B40 that they shot at us. Loud explosion, and then I turned around and I saw blood everywhere. I didn't know if my blood was there. It turned out that was okay, and then right after that, my brother kind of, moved forward, still trying to lower his head, but moved forward and asked, kind of gave me a signal, asked if I was okay. I said okay, gave back the signal, said I was okay. And then we kept sailing real smoothly, quietly toward the ocean. And luckily, they didn't shoot again. 6-7 people got hit by the shrapnel. Luckily, nobody died, but one of the sailors got a big hit on the leg. I was probably the one who knew anything about medicine on the boat, so I took the responsibility to take care of them. I said, do this, do that. I didn't know if the bone was fractured. It was a leg bone that we call the tibia, and I didn't know it was broken, but I decided to brace it anyway, so I used 2 pieces of wood and then cloth to wrap around to stabilize it. There was one girl with a shrapnel hitting her abdomen, and so I tried to clean the wound. Interesting story. She went with her boyfriend, and so that guy was kind of possessive. He didn't want me to do anything. He said, let me take care of it. And he said, I'm a medical student too. I said, okay, go ahead. I'm just trying to help. And by watching him and seeing, I knew he didn't know much about medicine, but let it be, whatever you want to do. We are free now, so do whatever you want to do. That was around maybe 3 o'clock, and by the time we got to sea, It was dark, twilight. And we got out there, we saw the military boat from a ship from the U.S. And we knew at the time that was the 7th Fleet. And they were signaling Morse code to us, but nobody could read it, including the Vietnamese Navy. And we were trying to follow them, but they backed away real fast. And at that point, people on the boat decided that we should go to Singapore. So they changed direction and went straight to Singapore. At night, we saw a merchant ship, and thinking back, it might have been an oil tanker. Very few crew there. In fact, we saw only one crew, and somehow we communicate with them, and then they lowered the hose with water, and then we had some container on the boat, and they just pumped water to our boat. So somebody was asking for water, and they did that. And everybody was thirsty at the time, so we tried to get some water. I got some too, and I couldn't believe it because the water was kind of rusty, and it had a smell of gasoline too. But you're thirsty, so you had to drink it and try to survive. We got some water from that oil tanker, and that was it for everybody. Hope that we would get to a port or somewhere, and then finally, and then hopefully we'll get some food. Vietnam to Singapore, I think it was a day and a night, because the first night, that's when we get some water. The next day, we're sailing along the shore. We can see, the beautiful coast, and from time to time, we'll see helicopters from, I think at the time was Malaysian military. They were flying along us, watching for a while, and then they disappear. And then, hours later, we saw another one. Throughout the time I was taking care of wounded people, in the morning I would make rounds just like I did in the Vietnamese hospital. So I would go around asking who needs what and take a look at the wounds, see how they were doing. People realized that I knew what I was doing. So before getting to the port of Singapore, they said we should have someone to talk to them about the wounded and about people on the boat who needed medical care. And I would look like official, to talk to them. So somebody was really, inventive. They said, "Oh, we know how to make one." So they made they use a white piece of cloth and then some red cloth, and they sew a Red Cross band, and they gave it to me. They say, "Wear this," and then go talk to them. The Singaporean medics were very good. They sent the boat, and they took the sick people from our boat onto their boat and to shore, and they allowed me to join them. They said, "Come with us." And and my younger brother said, "Can I come too, because I have stomach pain?" I said, "Okay, go ahead and join them." And so we got on the boat, and I sailed with them to shore. I saw, tents being built there as a temporary hospital or infirmary, and they took the sick people in, and I don't know what they did to them. Of course, they took care of them, and I was sitting at the shore because I was not sick. So I was sitting at the shore, and somebody gave me a ration of food, and I was eating. And that was the best meal. And then I realized that I finally escaped. When we got there, then we got the shortwave communication with other boats, and so we began to communicate. The captain of the boat, who was in the Navy, so he knew exactly what to do, and he found out, he kind of, briefed us on the situation. He said, oh, there are about 6,000 people here, so don't expect to be moved fast because, with 6,000, they're very busy. And we didn't know what to expect. Some people say, oh, we're okay now. They will just pick us up and just fly us away. And some people said that's not going to happen. We're not VIP, or we are not. And who has the money to process all those evacuation? Plus, we had a bunch of wounded people who were being treated there. We don't even know if they would be, accepted to the country or would be sent back to the boat. And then one night, I heard some sound on the side of the boat. Turned out that the sick people were being returned to our boat, and then I heard that we got fuel and we got food, and they escorted us back to sea. And then we were kind of, slowly sailing to Subic Bay. That was in the Philippines. That trip was probably more than a week. Could have been 10 days. And I learned that the engine of the boat was not in that good of a condition. And I look at the passing water and kind of imagine, if we were running or walking, how fast that would be going. And I estimated that was about the speed of a bicycle. So we were bicycling from Singapore to the Philippines at that rate. On the way, we saw a helicopter kind of circling around, and we gave signal that we have wounded people. And then shortly after that, they sent a small boat to pick up the wounded people. And at that point, then I was relieved. I said, okay, they were taking care, especially the guy who had what I thought was a broken bone. Then they took him on board too. We got to Subic Bay in the afternoon, almost evening. The sun was down. It was just, the last light of the day was there. In contrast to Singapore, in Singapore, somebody was watching us the whole time. Helicopters, jet planes flying overhead. Ship from the Singaporean Navy greeted us and kind of, show us where to go. Subic was totally different. It was so quiet. We were surprised. We said, where is everybody? And as we sailed, keep going further and further to Subic Bay, we saw rows of old Vietnamese Navy ships just anchoring there. Finally, it was a bay. We saw land everywhere, and the captain decided to anchor, and we slept there overnight. Nothing happened until morning, when one guy with one boat coming from the shore, and that was people from the refugee camp. And he came in and he talked to people, and he wanted to know how many people and if we wanted to stay. Of course, we said we wanted to stay there, and then he just, took in the whole shipload of what he could carry, and then go back and take more until he evacuated all 250 people. There were a lot of Vietnamese refugees sitting, staying there. And every time a boat comes in, they would come out and see if they can see their relatives. So I saw a friend of mine there. I said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" From medical school. And then after that, after I got on the shore, then I found out more of my friends were there. People whom I know well had been there ahead of me. And then they put us into groups and then assigned place to stay. In my case, we went all the way to the top of the hill in the island, and there were, empty building. Just a roof on top, no electricity, nothing at all, but walls and roof. There was a yard outside. We managed to hang a rope to turn that into volleyball court, and we play volleyballs there. And the refugee officials, they took care of us, and then they left us alone. Yeah, just show up for meal 3 times a day, but other than that, there's nothing. Oh, and then evening they had movies for us to watch. And they have the outdoor screen, and you just gather on the hills and watch the movie. I think we had, I had a wristband, and so we know what number we have, and then they will call us, and then when it's our time, then we just go there, and they would just fly us to Guam. In Guam, I kind of befriended with one of the Marines in charge of moving people. And at that time, I had received letters from my sponsors from the U.S. Of course, I sent letters as soon as I found out I could. So they received my letter. They wrote back. They said, "Oh, you can come and stay with us." So I got that letter. One day I went to one of the Marines guarding the airfield. I talked to him. I said, "I got this letter. You think I can go?" And he looked at it. He read it. He said, "Yeah, let's just go get your people, get your group, because they had priorities for people who have sponsor and willing to accept them." So I went back to camp. I got everybody. We grabbed things real fast, and then we went to the airport. And so we left Guam really fast. Maybe after 3 days or so after we got there. The sponsor was the McCary, the one who took care of me when I was a student, was an AFS student in 1967, 68. Yeah. And then when I got here, then I began to talk to people and to look around and said, "Hey, maybe there's a chance that I can go back to medical school." So as soon as I got to Camp Pendleton, I began to think about it and began to talk to people, finding out my friends who were in the same situation, what they were doing, writing letters to them, and asking them if they have any idea what to do. When I was ready to leave, I looked around the house, and I looked into my sister's room, and I saw that camera hanging on the wall. Apparently, either she forgot, or she didn't think that it was valuable, or she didn't have room for it. So I grabbed it and I took it along. I didn't even know if it had film in there. I just knew that it was kind of valuable, and I could use it to bribe my way or sell and get some money. Turned out to be pretty useful because I was able to take picture.